Hi everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'd like to go over this SUNO ad I saw. It questions why music only has 12 notes. So the word microtonal is never mentioned, but I think what I would like to say is that anyone who asks that question should probably know about the word microtonal because it's a good descriptor of what's going on. So, I've always thought that a lot of these AI tools are put out there in such a way that it's trying to accelerate the process of making things cheap and stupid, which I don't really like. So the fact that they've even gotten to the point of asking this question, instead of thinking that everything getting more and more homogenized counts as, intellectual diversity or something, even though they're outsourcing their thinking, I was kind of shocked. So I really would like to see what they have to say. So I'll just be reacting to this bit by bit. Let's go ahead and go through this video a bit and see what it's got to say.
Why does music only have 12 notes? I mean, think about it. Every song you've ever heard only has 12 notes.
Okay, so we're starting with an interesting assumption. It's bold of you to assume. This isn't true of me. I've heard songs with differing amounts of notes. And many others, this is true of them as well. But perhaps, I think you could allow me to translate here. There's, I think, a certain kind of person that only looks at material marketed at them algorithmically. And I think this category extends past just normies, because it's become so easy to do. If you're not too interested in broadening your knowledge or experiencing the sheer variety of things that can exist, then it's quite easy to be insulated enough to only stumble across music using 12 notes, or 12-tone equal temperament. Michael Brucci calls this the 12-tet enculturated listener. And I think that's technically the best term for this kind of person, because it's the most specific. So this video then assumes you are a 12-tet enculturated listener. I hope the assumption is flawed for obvious reasons. Let's continue.
There's no rule in nature that says you have to have 12 notes.
Right.
In fact, in between each note, there's infinite notes.
Right again.
So why don't we use them? Well, because the old system didn't line up.
Not very specific, but I think he's referring to just intonation and temperament not lining up.
Let me explain. Early musicians didn't start with 12 notes. And that's because early music wasn't standardized. Different musicians in different regions tuned differently. Some used mathematical ratios and others used local traditions. And some tuned by ear.
I'm surprised by how right this is so far, but also how unspecific it is. Because I think there comes a point where you try and make the words so simple as stand-ins for other words to avoid jargon that you end up kind of saying things that are really, really obvious. So they can't help being true. But I think there is a little bit of explanatory power in this. So far, not too bad. Other than assuming I haven't heard music outside of 12-tet before, but this is an algorithmic thing, so.
The goal was to make everything sound as pure as possible. And in some keys, it sounded amazing, but the moment you started to change the key is when things started to drift.
Oh!
And
Okay, so I know he's trying to say that in some keys it sounded amazing, and in some keys it's not. And then he plays the not amazing thing, and it sounds incredible, because there's this very, very shallow, projected opinion of what something means to be amazing. Okay, so this is the part I'm taking issue with so far. So I understand what he's trying to say, so I think I might do a little bit more translation. So with this statement, the goal was to make everything sound as pure as possible. I think the word pure is a stand-in for just intonation, a tuning system that uses low-number frequency ratios. And the goal he's describing, this fits with the old system's not lining up idea. The goal he's describing is to get instruments to play intervals that are as close to low-number frequency ratios as possible. And that is not something that is a part of all music traditions or universal whatsoever. And I don't think he's trying to say that it is. It's just that he's so unspecific that you could misinterpret it as that. it would be good to say, instead of the goal was to make everything sound as pure as possible, something like, for Western musicians, temperament was important to help certain intervals sound like low number frequency ratios. That's a little bit jargon laden, but it would be more specific and get the point across. So I would just be worried that everyone would think that pure ratios are the only thing that cultures could want all the time, because people will immediately make these sorts of generalizations and assumptions if you're not specific enough. The risk is, you have more jargon, you appear more inaccessible, but you're more truthful. Okay, so we've got that statement translated. Okay, now let's go over this thing, the in and in some keys.
It sounded amazing, but the moment you started to change the key is when things started to drift.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, since this is an AI ad, I'm thinking that, he can't be doing anything systemically not 12-10. Then this ad would be a lot different. But I think this first one, where it says, and in some keys it sounded amazing, and then there's a bland C chord, the next thing after that, it kind of sounds like it's vaguely a D-flat tonality to me, with maybe some scales falling. Yeah, if the scale was falling, it would make sense that there are microtonal steps that we kind of hear moving up in the arpeggiation, and then as it's flattening, like those half steps would sound smaller than they should be, because when they're going up, the pitch is lowering, so you get a smaller distance. Okay, like...
It sounded amazing, but the moment you started to change the key is when things started to drift.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening. I think it's like approximating a D-flat chord or a D-flat major 7th chord, and then pitch shifting down all the way an entire whole step through that whole thing. So anyway, that sounded really cool. Okay, let's talk about just these awful uses of amazing and good and bad. This is a pet peeve for me. So I think people will overuse good and bad to refer to obviousness and clarity. And it's getting to a really dire point where if somebody hears something and they don't understand it right away, they call it bad. And that's really dangerous. Because, I don't know, I just feel like as creatures of knowledge, we should be trying to broaden and ask questions. And so when we just sort things into bins of good and bad, it's not only black and white thinking, but it also adds nothing to the conversation, right? So really, when you say something is good and bad without explaining it at all, I have to then translate what you actually mean. So I get no new information, we think less, and we become more shallow. It's a lose-lose situation all around. But let me translate again. And in some keys, it sounded amazing. That probably means, and in some keys, it sounded more in tune with low number frequency ratios. So that's, too jargony again. But it's just a few more words. It's really not a big deal. He could explain, he said frequency ratios in the video. So that made me think that he could take like one sentence to explain frequency ratios, right? But anyway, he could bother explaining why it sounds the way it does instead of just saying simple good, complicated bad, or whatever he's going on about. There's like 7 things that are all bundled into this reductionist good, bad sort of mentality that's put forth. Okay, so in some keys it sounded amazing, great.
Sounded amazing, but the moment you started to change the key is when things started to drift.
Okay, so changing the key is when things started to drift. Now, that's interesting because I don't think that ensembles were drifting in pitch except in situations where they didn't have fixed pitch instruments. And I don't think that was a major problem. But I think he's trying to refer to the idea, well, not only the idea of pitch drift, but then perhaps also the idea of being able to use temperament to play something relatively in tune in one key, but then if you go to a different key, there would be wolf intervals, and so it would be out of tune according to the European definitions. So he could be conflating both those ideas at once in a way that doesn't really explain it. So I think this statement is probably the least explanatory and least true so far out of the technical statements for that reason.
And when orchestras came into the picture, things got way worse. I mean, think about it. Now you have dozens of musicians using dozens of instruments, all using different tuning methods.
Yeah, that's accurate.
So eventually, musicians realized they had a problem. So they compromised. They said, let's just divide an octave into 12 equal steps. Now, every key works, every instrument agrees, and nothing breaks even when we change keys. So,
All right. I think that works. That's it's not very direct, but the statement "nothing breaks when we change keys" definitely makes me think of the idea that if you have a tuning system where some keys are more in tune than others, that's the situation that would be trying to be avoided.
why 12? Well, because 12 was just the best compromise. It was close enough to the old methods while still being able to work in every key.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. A lot of microtonalists might not want to admit that because it's more exciting to think of alternative tuning systems. But 12-tone equal temperament specifically is the smallest equal temperament that will give a reasonable diatonic scale and major and minor triad constructs. And that is super important for the development of the piano. Since pianos are large and expensive, they absolutely should have as few keys as possible. You could, of course, preserve mean tone tuning with 19-tone equal temperament, but I wonder if anyone has calculated how expensive it would be to make a 19-tone equal tempered piano, assuming all the factory equipment is there and all you have to do is add 7 more notes per octave. Or maybe the fact that it's not 12 means that this stuff that you have to do is more expensive because it's a custom craft. Like, it's not as simple as just adding extra strings in for more notes. You might have to use a different scale for the hand, various other things. So 12 is really, it's quite a miracle.
So the next time you listen to music, just remember, you're listening to infinity divided by 12.
I'm trying to figure out how I feel about that very last statement. So the next time you listen to music, just remember, you're listening to infinity divided by 12. I really like that there's that little spark in his eyes when he's describing the infinity. Makes me think there's some hope, because, you know, infinity divided by 12, that makes 12 seem small. But I don't think he's trying to do that. I think he's trying to say, hey, these are the historical reasons that we ended up with 12 notes. And that's pretty much all there is. So now you understand where it comes from. Don't question it too hard. You know, they can never acknowledge microtonality as legitimate because it takes a lot of work to get there, and people aren't willing to put in that work usually. But I just wish, you know, that it maybe instead of saying that, he had also said, and check out microtonal music. You don't have to use 12 notes all the time. This kind of makes it seem like he's defeated. And it's like, all right, we got to 12. That's the best thing. We shouldn't use anything else. I mean, it's not like the metric system, right? Because in something like that, let's say the metric system versus the American system, you have certain reasons to quantize units, and the only reasons those are generally useful are for measurement and division purposes and communication purposes. But standardization of musical tuning systems is so much more than that, because tuning systems have their own aesthetics. Like, that's huge. And people should care about that if they pretend to care about aesthetics. Yeah, well, anyway, that's my reaction to SUNO's why do we have 12 notes? It's not even what if we didn't have 12 notes. It's why do we have 12 notes? What if we didn't have 12 notes? I'm waiting for that one. That would be quite interesting, because really, I think there's a lot of music that can use kind of predictable pop tonality where things repeat in short cycles over and over and over and over and over and over that could use microtonal tuning pretty effectively. And you don't have to be like some insane mathematician to do that. But I think you do have to enjoy interesting harmony and melody. Anyway, that's all I got.